Hoomes, CEO and Artistic Director at Nashville Opera Association. Welcome to Signature Required.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
I am uniquely excited to have you here today because I'll be the first to confess to you that many things around the opera just intimidate the heck out of me. My family didn't grow up going to the opera. I have such little experience with the opera that having you here today is an unbelievable treat. Just getting to experience a world that by the end of this podcast, I'm hopeful that you can take some of the layers back, and especially for a lot of our listeners, perhaps the overwhelming majority that also haven't had the experience of an opera, to make it a little less intimidating. So at least for me, I promise you a number of dumb questions today. I promise you a number of things that you're probably going to say, I don't know where he's going with that, but come along with me, and we're going to have a good time here together.
I think that sounds great.
So maybe start off with just your original story. You've been doing this a really long time. How long have you been involved with the Nashville Opera?
I came to Nashville in 1995, and I came here as the artistic director of the company, which I still am. I am now the CEO and artistic director. So I've been here, if I survive until the coming year, it will be my 30th anniversary with the opera company.
I feel like you need to throw a party or something. That's a big deal.
Well, I know. Well, maybe we will. I don't know. But I've been based here in Nashville that time. I work around the country as a stage director as well as direct the shows here. So my home base is Nashville, and I also run the company here.
Okay. So what portion of the time are you on the road versus in town?
Not as much as I used to be.
Okay.
I can afford to go out maybe 2-3 times. And when I say go out, it's usually a period of around 3 weeks.
Oh,
That's
wow.
usually a rehearsal period. But nowadays, because we have Zoom, because we have cell phones and everything, it's not that hard. You can still stay in touch, and staff meeting by Zoom and things like that.
That's wonderful. So are you supporting other opera companies across the nation, or what are you working on?
Yeah, they would, other opera companies, if they want one of our productions I've done here in Nashville, then they'll hire me to come and bring our production and install it there in their theater. Other times they will just ask me to come as a director, and they have a show of their own, and they want me to come and direct it.
That's really cool. I love that.
I can imagine as a youth daydreaming of a lot of different things when you're a young child. I can imagine being an astronaut, a pilot,
Yes.
a baseball player, but the artistic director and CEO of the Nashville Opera is a pretty cool little niche that you have gotten into. So maybe take me back to your childhood or a moment where did you have this experience growing up and you were just brought up into this world?
I had no experience with opera growing up, none whatsoever, until I hit college. I grew up in South Alabama, northern Florida, around Pensacola and Mobile. The arts there were incredibly limited. I don't know if I ever heard much classical music at all. There were two primary arts outlets, and one was church, of course, in every small town in the South, and the other was movies and television. And so those are the two things I gravitated toward. I think for a while, my family at least was gearing me more toward church work, like a minister of music. I think the goal at that time was to be a minister of music in a giant mega church like in Texas. That didn't work out. But I also felt when I was little, if I'd known I could have done this, I probably would have moved to California and try to get into movies in Hollywood, because I still have a huge love of movies. But then I kind of discovered music and I discovered live theater. And I started as an actor-singer, probably not a great singer, but I went to university in Birmingham at Samford University, which is they had a terrific music school. So I went there, and there I really discovered classical music. And there I discovered opera, because they would do one show a year, and I was there for a 4-year program. And one of the first operas I saw was a piece that you don't see much anymore called The Consul. And it was a piece written by a man named Giancarlo Menotti, and he wrote it for Broadway in the 40s. It was a Broadway opera. You don't find those much anymore. No. But it was a piece about freedom, and it was a piece about a woman who was living in what they call then an Iron Curtain country, trying to escape that country. And her husband had already escaped, and she was hoping to follow him. And he told her, just go to the consulate, they'll help you, they'll get a visa. And she gets so mired in the bureaucracy and red tape that, spoiler alert, she never gets out. And I didn't know opera could tell those stories. And there were darker stories than Broadway. They were more human, real stories. And that really piqued my interest a lot. And I didn't really want to sing, although I have a training as a singer in music. But I got very interested in the overall picture of not only the singing, but also the drama of the piece and the costuming of the piece and the sets and the lighting and the video sometimes in a piece. And so I just kind of moved in that direction. You know? And so when I finished Samford, I went to graduate school at Indiana University, which at the time was one of the top opera schools in the country. And the theater I worked in as a grad student growing up there was equal to the Metropolitan Opera in New York. They built the exact same facility, the same stage. It was a giant stage with hydraulic side stages that would roll on. It was amazing. And all the teachers there said, don't get used to this because this is not the way the world is. But it was a great experience, and it gave me a lot to work with and to think about and grow. My first 6 months there, I was working with Leonard Bernstein on a project, who was there in residency. And I just thought, well, this must be the way it is. It's not the way it is at all.
And for our listeners, Leonard Bernstein
wrote West Side Story and a ton of other fantastic pieces, and was a major American composer, orchestrator, musician, conductor. But I thought, okay, this is great. And at the time, I had no idea what I was getting, that type of training. But then I got out in the world, and I've been fortunate to be working steadily ever since.
Wow. Okay, so my parents met at Indiana University in Bloomington. And so I had spent my entire infant years going to Bloomington and much of my adolescence there. So I had no idea that they had this prolific opera. I knew Bobby Knight basketball, but I did not know about the opera. So are there a lot of schools across the nation that are doing this, or is it special to IU? And
there are a number of schools across the country that have opera programs, some pretty major programs. Obviously, Juilliard is one, Eastman School of Music, Cincinnati Conservatory is fantastic. They're kind of the IU rival in Cincinnati. But there's some great ones on the West Coast as well. I went to Indiana because first I had a friend that had gone there and had said how great it was, but they also had great connections in the business because they really train you for a professional career. But yeah, Bloomington was great. There was a place down near the Opera Theater there called Bear's Place. They had pizza and beer. It was great. But it's a college town, but right in the middle is a replica of the Met, basically. And they would do 8 giant productions a year, 6 during the year and 2 in the summer.
I missed out.
No, it was amazing. The second year I was there, I was involved in a production of Sweeney Todd, which is a big famous Broadway piece, you know, and we used the actual set from Broadway. They just finished it, and it was on its way somewhere else, and so they brought it to IU, and we pieced it back together, and we did it there. And I remember being inside the bakery house, you know, doing something, because I was in the stage crew at that time. And up on the wall, there was graffiti that Angela Lansbury had left that said Angela was here.
No kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
That's really cool.
So yeah, small world, you know, small world.
I love that.
So you're at IU, walk us through the evolution to eventually come to Nashville and rising into the role that you're at today.
Well, when I left IU, I started getting jobs at different companies and festivals, and like everyone, starting first kind of as a quasi-paid intern and then working as an assistant. And I started working as an assistant stage manager, and they're the people that work backstage to basically make sure the show runs.
Wearing all black.
Wearing all black, totally. And And I did that for a number of years. An assistant stage manager doesn't call the show. That's where you call the light cues. You really just make sure everything runs. You make sure the chorus comes on. You make sure the principal singers, they get on. In fact, there's a whole method that you stand backstage with someone, no matter how much they've done it, and you have a score, and you give them, you say, stand by. And then a few seconds later, you say go, and you idiot-proof them getting on stage, right? And so I did that for a few years. I was in Philadelphia doing that with a very famous opera singer named Luciano Pavarotti, and he was singing at the time, and I was this kid. And he'd been singing this opera, I think it was called Elixir of Love. He'd been singing this opera for 20 years. And I'm this kid, and I'm backstage with him, and it comes time for him to go on. I say, stand by. And he turns to me and he said, you are going to tell me when to go on. And I said, that's my job, and go, because I was too young to know any difference. But I did that for a number of years, and then I worked into stage managing, so you're actually controlling the backstage and calling the show. And then I was an assistant director, but I always wanted to direct. I always wanted to be the person who could put the show together in all the aspects of it. And I had kind of a vision for what I wanted with certain shows, which is what you need.
As a career guy in logistics, that all I have done is move trucks from here and there and A and B and warehousing and all the stuff. Sounds like you're a cousin in that way, that behind the scene, there's a lot of stuff going on back there, and you also have a lot of egos to manage back there from time to time, perhaps. And
a lot.
Yeah.
I'll say a much more creative cousin, perhaps.
Yes, that's right. It's just all keeping it on time, because certainly on stage like that, you don't notice 5 seconds in logistics. You notice it back there.
You do. Everything is synchronized to the second, ideally. And there are always things you have to work around and work with, but it's a lot of logistics, and just coordinating. So when people come to a show and the curtain goes up and they watch the show, it's like they're only seeing the tip of the iceberg of what it's taken to get there and to put it together, and even what's going on backstage. There's so much going on, but you see this focused area. And that's the intent. Ideally, you come to a show and you see that and you go, great, and you have no idea what it took to get there. That's the goal, right?
Sounds like a metaphor for life.
It is.
Yeah, totally. Honestly.
This is now going to be a deeper podcast where we're going to go into
Sorry.
life lessons.
Back it up.
So, all right, when does John arrive to Nashville, and what is Nashville like when you think about opera and its receptiveness to that?
Nashville has been so receptive because part of my career, and you mentioned this earlier, is to try to demystify the art form. Because I've talked to so many people who have never been to an opera, and they say, well, one, I'm afraid I won't understand it, or they say I'm going to feel dumb coming to it, or I say I don't know what to wear. And I've tried to demystify it my entire career. In what opera is really are terrific stories, because it is a theater piece, ideally. They're terrific stories with the best music in the world. And that's what I'm doing. And I try my best to make it accessible for people, because opera did not start out as some highfalutin type of thing. It started out as something everyone would come to. It was almost like the movies of the day. Everybody would come to the opera, and you can get a cheap ticket and come to the opera. And the opera, somehow it evolved into more of what is seen as an elitist entertainment. That was never the intent. And one of the most famous composers, whose name is Giuseppe Verdi, who wrote a ton of pieces, his entire philosophy was the theater remains to be filled. Because one, he wanted the ticket sales, but two, he wanted to appeal to as wide an audience as possible. And that's what I've tried to carry out here in Nashville. I was in New York for a while. I was in Philadelphia for a good bit, and I started working around the country. And I'm from the South, and little by little working my way back down south. Not intentionally, that's just where the jobs were. And my wife and I came here together. So when Nashville hired us, they hired us as a team to come in. We were not yet married at the time, but they hired us as a team to come in. Me overseeing the artistic side primarily, and her overseeing more of the administrative executive director side. Now, there was so much crossover because we worked closely together and we would kind of cross ideas over, but we were hired together. And so before I came to Nashville, and I'm not sure if either of you have toured much, but you get tired of being in a hotel or traveling all the time, you know? And so, and she was traveling too. She was a stage manager. And so weren't always in the same city. And so she was here in Nashville, and Nashville was looking to make a change. And she called me and she said, look, Nashville's going to be making a change soon with leadership. And I'd worked in a number of companies, but I'd never been in this position. She hadn't either. But she and I had put together a business plan for an opera and nonprofit, because we thought eventually we may try to start our own somewhere. We may try to start our own company and treat people well and be ethical and create a company the way we thought it should be. And so she called me and she said, should I show them the plan? I said, yeah, show them the plan. It's not going to hurt anything. And I was in one city working and she was in Nashville. And so she showed it to the board. They brought me in. We had a couple of interviews, and then they hired us to come in and basically instigate a lot of the plan we had created. And that's what we've done. And Nashville was very open. I can't tell you the generosity of people here in Nashville. We have fantastic donors. I have a great board of directors. And so they kind of gave us free rein to create.
Wow.
And so when we first came here, the entire budget of the Nashville Opera, I think, was around $340,000 total. They had accrued some debt, you know, and so we had a big job, and there were three of us. And it was a big job, but we got a lot of friends together in the opera world, so I'd call favors in to get like major singers to come in. We started doing more productions. We started getting out in the community more. And I've been there 30 years, but now our budget next year, I think, is around $3.4 million.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's really cool. And I was reading, you have created the Nashville Opera into being is it a stage 2, level 2
level
opera?
2, tier 2, level
tier
2.
2. Mm-hmm. Help me, because there can't be any stupid questions. Help me understand the different tiers of opera world.
There are 5 tiers in the opera world.
Okay.
The Met is tier 1.
Okay.
They're like up here because their budget's like $300 million a year. So it's all on budget usually.
Does it stand alone up there as one?
No, Chicago, Lyric Opera Chicago, Los Angeles Opera. Usually opera companies in very large cities.
Okay.
Because they have a bigger donor base, and so they're much larger. We for years were a tier 3 company, and that's a budget from I think 1 million to 3. And then below 1 million is like a tier 4. There may not be a tier 5 anymore. So it's a tier 4 is 1 million and below. And these are all companies in cities all over the country. Almost every city has an opera company and a ballet company and a symphony. And I think that's important for a city to have. But they're different sizes depending on their donor base and the size of the city. So we were level 3 for a long time, and we really started to push to change levels because and now we are a tier 2 company. But being a tier 2 company puts Nashville at the same table of cities like Boston, Kansas City, San Diego, Charlotte, Austin, that you always hear compared to Nashville. And so we now are seen differently because we're a tier 2 company, and we're seen equal to like Boston.
Wow.
And that's a great thing, which Nashville should be. Yeah. I love this city. And we want to help grow in this city, and we want to bring the art we create out into this city. And I really think it can heal a lot of our society and life. The arts are so important.
I love the entrepreneurial undertone that is throughout your entire story. Is seeing that scrappiness, the plan, and even amongst a framework where it's not that you started the Nashville Opera, but you formed its culture and its identity and have been so critical in making the choices that it's going to go in this direction or it's not. And you've had a 10x result of that over your time.
Thanks.
That's amazing.
We're very fortunate, and it took a lot of hard work, but it also took a lot of support from the people of Nashville. And I think Nashville is unique in that, because we do a lot of the classics. Like I'm going to be doing Carmen, that's a top 10 opera. We've done Puccini's La Bohème, top 10 opera. Every company does those. But about 10 years ago, we built a facility on the west side of town, which is our production facility, rehearsal facility, administrative offices. And I had a black box theater space, which is a space, and by that it means you're basically in this large box. You can put lighting and sound, and you can do small-scale shows there. And so about 10 years ago, we introduced a series of doing shows that weren't classics, shows that were very non-mainstream shows, but I think are important shows and important to expose our city to. Now, what I found out is Nashville is a city of new work and new art, because somewhere not far from this studio, someone's sitting in a truck working on a song. They're on break and they're writing a song. So when you say, I have a new song in this city, people say, great, let me hear it. They aren't afraid it's a new song. In opera, that's not the case so much. So many people want opera to stay doing works that are 200 years old. But I've no interest in being a museum and having only things you can view behind glass and you can't touch. So anything we do, I want to make accessible. And so we started this series called the Noah Leff Opera Center series, and in which I do small pieces. I do one a year, usually in November, and we have done all kind of things here in Nashville that most companies would not touch because they don't trust the audience, or they feel the audience doesn't want to see this, or maybe their audience doesn't want to see it. And some have tried and failed. We've been very successful. And so we offer a diet of the classics, like Carmen, but you also can come and see something really different. And so in this small space, we've done works by Philip Glass that a company our size usually would never do. We've done it. There's a wonderful composer in New York named David Lang, who's with a band called Bang on a Can. We've done a piece by his here. I did an opera by Carly Simon here that nobody knew existed. And she wrote a piece about 10 years ago in New York, and I liked it. And so I said, we should try to do it. And so we did. I never got to meet her, but I talked to her on the phone a few times. But we did this piece that she wrote about her life, and it's an opera. So we presented all kind of different pieces here, but I think one reason we've been successful is we're in Nashville.
Yeah, Music City. I mean, that makes sense.
All kind of Music City.
So when you say certain people may not trust their audience, help me understand what that means. Is it because the content is actually pretty gritty and you're worried people won't want to see it? You said you were attracted to maybe the darker elements because there is light, but there also is dark in storytelling. Is that what people are struggling with in certain markets?
I don't. It's funny because so much of opera, even the classics, deal with darker elements.
Yeah.
Right? If you look at Carmen, when you break it down, what Carmen really is about a very straight-laced man who has a very nice girlfriend. He's from a small town. His mother wants him to marry this girl, and he meets Carmen, who is a very free-spirited woman, and all she asks is she wants to live her life the way she wants to live it. And she wants the same right as a man when it comes to love. And this guy falls in love with her, and it does not go well. It doesn't go well. And we get into some very dark areas.
Yeah.
But that's a classic piece. So some of the classic pieces are pretty dark sometimes. But I think but the music for Carmen was written, almost 200 years ago? And so the music is very melodic, it's very beautiful, and very accessible. And it's a very popular piece because of that, and I love Carmen. But some of the other pieces we do, like the Philip Glass piece, Philip Glass seems to be not everybody's taste, But we did 2 shows over the years by him. One was based on Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, and it's a great piece. The other piece we did was a piece called The Hydrogen Jukebox, which Philip Glass wrote the music, and it's beat poetry by Allen Ginsberg, and it's about America from the 60s to the 80s.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating, really cool piece. And after we did that piece, I had a woman from the audience come over to me at the end, And she said, she said, I just moved here from Los Angeles. And she said, never in my life would I expect to see this type of art in Nashville, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. So we want to explode that too. We want to explode. I'm in Nashville. It's all about country music. It's about all kinds of things. And Nashville downtown now, we have jazz, there's blues, we have a terrific orchestra with classical music. Nashville's a very eclectic town, so I think I've been able to, as they say, get away with a lot in what we do.
So, John, one of my favorite pieces that we do with each of our guests is a segment called No Dumb Questions. And normally there's like one or two of the questions.
Okay.
I've got like 5 or 6, and Carli probably has a couple. So I've held them back for about as long as I can. But I do need to give an important caveat that some of these questions are probably going to feel real dumb. And if I have your permission to just be playful and lighthearted, in the spirit that you just answered a second ago, to say that you're demystifying opera, I really appreciate that message, because I think just saying that takes courage to say, I am passionate about this art form, and this art form is really misunderstood. And rather than having a heart posture of like, well, that's everyone else's fault, that no one understands what opera's value could be. Instead, you seem to have a heart posture that says, hey, just give me the chance to teach you. Let me show you something. And even in how you say, hey, this one's a little more accessible versus not, I really appreciate that too, because you're acknowledging that there are some pieces that are going to be really tough to access for some maybe new people that are coming to the space. So with that lead in, do I have your permission to ask some dumb questions?
Bring it on.
Wait, can I tell him your starting point though?
Tell them the story.
I'm so sorry. So we were prepping for this, chatting today. I was like, can I tell him about the time you took me to the ballet, which is probably the most arty thing we've done? He's like, how dare you? How dare you remember this? For my birthday, before we were even married, Cinderella is one of my favorite stories. I've seen it in many mediums and art forms. And so he gets tickets thinking he's taking me to the musical of Cinderella, but it was the ballet in Chicago. And about 5 minutes in, the music is swelling and it's beautiful and the movement. And he leans over and he's like, are they ever going to talk? What is this? And I've never laughed so hard trying to look like I know what I'm doing at a ballet, but he was like, what is this? I thought it was a musical. Oh no, babe. Oh no. So this is your starting point for artistic, stupid questions.
I am here for you. My first time seeing the Nutcracker,
okay,
I kept thinking, is anybody going to sing or no?
Yeah,
because
thank you.
I was just ready for. I'm with you.
Okay, then you're at least in good company.
Oh, that makes me feel so much better.
I'm so happy for you.
I was so nervous about Carli telling that story, and now that you gave your reaction, I'm amongst my people now. And like when I heard you talking about being from Alabama and Sanford, I was like, okay, like he's got to get it on some level.
He's not going to storm out on you.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm diving into some dumb questions then. So, for someone that has never been to an opera, and they're maybe thinking, why in the world would I ever go? They express some of the questions you talked about earlier. What do I wear? What do I expect? If you could just break it down for the probably majority of our audience that has never been before, help take some of the apprehension away to say, this is what you should expect when you come to an opera and how to best understand what you're signing up for. So let's start maybe on that dumb question.
Okay. Well, let's start with Carmen, because we're going to be doing that soon. It has a very accessible story, as I mentioned before. It's a guy falls in love with a girl, doesn't work out, ends badly. A lot of operas end badly because they do. Many operas explore dark human emotion.
Okay.
Many are not for children because they explore dark human emotion. But if someone, and I see people a lot that have never been, first of all, you'll see people there dressed in everything. You'll see people there, some people in tuxedos, rarely anymore. Some people in a suit coat, a lot of people in jeans.
Okay.
And that's great. We don't really have a dress code at all It's whatever you feel comfortable in.
Jeans and a button down, you'd
Jeans
be
and
okay.
a button down is
you can
great.
take it up from there.
Jeans and a T-shirt with a with a saying that's okay in public, you're fine.
Oh, I love that. So you truly don't care. You're not.
Oh no.
Okay.
Oh no,
That's
no.
great.
If they come, no. We just want people to try to come. However you feel comfortable, please come. That's one thing. The second thing is a lot of the shows we do in the original language. So if a piece was written in Italian, we'll perform it in Italian, or German, or French. I've done a piece in Czech before. That's hard. Some pieces are written in English, but every piece we do, even the English pieces, I put English titles above the stage. So if you come to a show and you see it, they may be singing in French, but like a foreign movie, we have the English text above the stage.
That's so nice of you.
This started internationally about maybe 20-something years ago because they didn't before. And it started, and it was a great idea, and it's kind of revolutionized our business because now, I speak some Italian, but not enough to keep up, But that way I can come to a show and I can look up and I can see exactly what they're saying. And if you've ever watched a foreign movie, which most people have with subtitles, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it really has revolutionized understandability of a piece. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know we do that. And they don't realize I'm not going to sit there for a couple of hours of people singing in French. You're going to have the English above it. Mm-hmm. But I also tell people that what we really are doing is theater. It's a type of theater and storytelling and drama. Storytelling is important. A symphony concert is totally different. That's purely music. Ballet is different. That's more about the dance. We're about the storytelling and the drama of the piece. And a lot of the singers nowadays, they train both dramatically as well as musically. Singing an opera is its own thing. It's a certain type of singing you have to do. I call it controlled yelling because you have to learn to project your voice like this. Yeah. And even if we're in the Jackson Hall, which I think is around 2,000 seats, we use no microphones.
Really?
Oh, that's incredible.
Because these people, it's a very athletic art form, and you basically work up the lung power to produce sound that can cut over a 50-piece orchestra.
Wow.
And that's part of it. That's part of the dynamic because we're an acoustic art form. And if you've not heard an opera singer live, like close to you, it's a different experience because there's something so visceral about it that you feel it. And that's a big part of what we do. And often you can watch TV and opera on TV, or the Met does a high-def broadcast, and I'm glad they do because it gets it out everywhere. It's not the same as a live experience because we use no microphones. It's that person producing that special sound, and you feel it. And I can't explain it until you've experienced it. But I tell people that because you come to it. And the Jackson Hall is a very large space. The Lift Center, the smaller shows we do, I can seat 270 people. And you are 6 feet away from the stage. And that's a different experience because you're right there in the middle of it. But that's more what it was intended to be. Because a lot of the theaters these pieces were written for are not 2,000 seats. They're barely 1,000 seats. But they were always considered theater. Storytelling, and it was for the general public. It was for everybody.
I had no idea.
What a great answer. I just learned so much in that.
So much.
Yeah.
You're a storyteller and how you answer our questions.
Oh, it's very nice.
That.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate the fact that the opera started including subtitles because I would imagine there was a meaningful part of that culture that just was horrified by the thought of including the subtitles, that it would in some way diminish or water down the piece. So
yes.
I bet that was a whole battle in and of itself.
Horrified, right? Horrified, and in fact, the principal conductor who used to be at the Metropolitan Opera is no longer there. When this whole thing started, his big quote was, "The Met will have super titles over my dead body," and now they do, and he's gone.
Well, that counts as horrified. Yeah, that's right.
But he just felt it would destroy the art form. And it did not. If anything, it made it more accessible. But I have met people that don't want to make it accessible. They want it to maintain, as I say, behind glass so it's untouchable. That's just not what it is.
I think that's a really great message to come out of that, because in every subculture, there is a group that appreciates just that it is their own and they don't want to make it accessible.
Right.
But that's
Yes.
also a great way to have something die, that you don't expand and reproduce the interest and educate. So I just really appreciate that. Hearing that answer in and of itself makes it feel all the way from the dress to being able to understand what I'm hearing. That all is really helpful. Perfect. Dumb question number 1 answered for me. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Another question. So when I think about the content of a typical opera show, it's not something that I've generally heard before, that I have any context for being rooted at all in my culture today, like that you might see, for example, Hamilton in New York. Unbelievably successful political piece about the founding of our country, a musical, incredible lyrics. That had a little bit of a tie to certainly our country and maybe a little bit modern day. So can you talk to me about some of the decision making of the stories themselves and why a meaningful part of the opera seems to be, like what you mentioned, more museum-like rather than something that hits on popular culture of today?
Well, there's a very famous opera by Giuseppe Verdi called La Traviata, right? And let me get just a little bit of history here. And that's a piece he wrote, and it's one of the top pieces of his career, right? And it is about a woman who is a courtesan, which is actually a prostitute of some, a kept woman, and her name is Violetta, and she is the party queen of Paris. It's 1850, but she is dying. It's an opera, so she has like consumption, and she is slowly dying, and she has made the decision that, okay, I know I'm dying, and so she has the James Dean decision where she said, I'm going to live fast, die young, and leave a great-looking corpse. Right?
Wow.
And that's her choice. And at one of the parties, she meets this young man named Alfredo, who comes in specifically to meet her, and he's younger than her. But he comes in to meet her because he has fallen in love with her from afar. And he doesn't care who she is or what she is. His family does later, but he's in love with her. And she laughs it off at first, and then she realizes, in this emptiness of my world, maybe this is my one chance at true love. Maybe this is it. And so she leaves this life in Paris to go and live with him. And then again, it all goes horribly wrong because his family interferes, and because they can't have him marrying this type of woman. These are pretty universal stories. Yeah. Even today, there are plenty of families that disagree with someone that a son or a daughter fall in love with. That's kind of what this is about.
Yeah.
So a lot of these are pretty universal stories. There's a famous story called an opera called Rigoletto, and it was very famous. And it's about a father who is overly protective with his daughter, to the point of raising her, keeping her in a convent, not letting her know anything about the world, which is probably the worst thing you can do with a child, but he thinks he's protecting her. And then she, by chance, meets this man who ends up hurting her. And then her father seeks revenge. And once again, it goes horribly wrong because it's an opera. It goes horribly wrong. But I'm always wondering why nobody's made a movie of that plot. Because it would be so great, like Martin Scorsese, to set it in the mob world, where you have some guy who's a bartender for the mob, and his daughter is hurt by Joe Pesci's character, and the father seeks revenge, and it goes horribly wrong.
Yeah.
So all these stories, I think, if you break it down, they're very universal stories that we maybe not can identify with, but we understand and we've seen. But you have to break it down to the basics of what I'm seeing here. And that's what's made, to me, so many successful operas are when you break down a story like that I can follow all the points of the story, and you put this fantastic music with it that then elevates that story. And that's really what, to me, opera is. It really, I had a woman a few years ago come up to me at TPAC after seeing something, I think it was La Bohème, it's a big famous piece, and she had never seen an opera, and she went to Broadway all the time. And she came up and after it's over and she's crying. It's very emotional at the end. She came up and she said, "This is like the Rolls Royce of Broadway." And I said, "I'm going to steal that quote."
Should.
Yeah.
I have a stupid question. My turn? Okay. Arguably, these are not the happiest endings. We have said that.
Sometimes.
Yes. So if I'm trying to raise kids, we have 4 kids, with an awareness of this art form, where is our entry point? How do I get them involved with opera in an age-appropriate way?
It all depends on the opera. It all depends on the show and the age of the child. There are some pieces written that are comedies for children. There is a wonderful operatic version of Cinderella. Wonderful version. A famous comic opera for the entire family is The Barber of Seville. And Bugs Bunny parodied that, and you've heard the music in Bugs Bunny.
Okay.
And that's and we'll be doing it probably in a year or two here in town. It's a terrific show, but it's a comedy. I mean, nobody dies, no dark subjects. It's all funny.
Wraps up at the end without blood and murder.
No blood and murder. None at the end. At the end of
You
that.
probably won't like it because he only likes shows that have blood and murder. But it sounds right up my alley.
Well, I'd say 80% end with blood and murder, but there's 20% that don't.
There's a few for us.
Okay.
For me.
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah.
There's a few.
Yeah,
I love that.
And usually every other year or so, we specifically do a family piece, and often it's a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. A lot of opera companies do not program G&S because they feel it's not really an opera, but it does take opera singers to do it, and it's incredibly clever. It's in English. It is for the entire family. And they wrote these during, we did Pirates of Penzance a few years ago, sold out, family audience. And Gilbert, who wrote the lyrics, the libretto for the piece, he has a famous quote, and he said, "My partner and I," he said, we want to write family entertainment. We want to write a piece that any father could bring their daughter to, and neither would be given reason to blush."
Aww.
And I thought, okay, that's sweet. But that was written 100 or more years ago in the Victorian era in London. But they were writing family entertainment. And so we do those occasionally.
Oh, I love that. I mean, Spence takes our girls on daddy-daughter dates every other week, and he just rotates through our 3 girls. And I almost feel like you can't take them to a movie today without there being something to make them blush.
Well, got to be careful.
Yeah. So, I mean, kudos to you guys for bringing that to Nashville. I love that.
Thanks.
Couple other just logistical things. Is there just one show per season? Is the opera a year-round art form that you're going to join, or is it very like, hey, we're active 5 months out of the year, but not active 7 months out of the year? What's kind of the cadence of how the Nashville Opera runs out of the 12 months?
We stay active the entire 12 months.
Okay.
Our main stage season, in which we do our big shows and what I call the main stage shows, we do 4 a year. Usually at TPAC, depending. Coming up, we'll be opening our season with Carmen, which is, again, I can't say enough great stuff about it. It's a big, famous, crowd-pleasing opera. Maybe not for the kids, but a crowd-pleasing opera. It gets a little stabby at the end. Spoiler alert.
Literally.
Yeah. And then,
Perfect.
And then we're closing our season with a piece called Lucia di Lammermoor, which is about... it's now Italian opera set in Scotland, set in the 1800s, about a woman who is put into an arranged marriage by her brother. It does not end well. It ends well for her, but not for anybody else. But we're closing our season with that. We're doing HMS Pinafore, family piece, in January.
Okay.
And again, it is comedy, funny, light, beautiful. And then in November, I'm doing one of my small, strange shows, non-mainstream shows, I'll say. We're doing a world premiere, but at the beginning, it's a 2-act evening. The first 1-act opera we're doing is called Bon Appetit. It's an opera about Julia Child.
I want to go to that.
It's super cool. And during the opera, Julia Child bakes a chocolat gâteau during the show. And if you're on the front row, she will then serve some people. You can try the cake.
Are tickets for sale yet?
Tickets are. They just went on sale.
Is the front row already taken?
Well, let me say, this is an experiment. So my advice is you may not want to try the cake because we're still figuring this out of how this is going to work.
Singing and baking.
Yeah, that's the ideal. The ideal, though, is you'll be able to try some of what she does. And then we'll take a little intermission, and then we're going to come back with a brand new piece, world premiere, called The Cook-Off by Sean Okpebolo. He's a Nigerian-American composer in Chicago. And the librettist is Mark Campbell, who won the Pulitzer a few years ago. And they've made this one-act piece. It'll be the first time anybody's seen it. And it's called The Cook-Off. And it's an opera based in the world of television competitive cooking shows.
Yes,
this is unbelievable.
Literally,
this is
I fall asleep every night watching cooking shows. It's like my secret love. So
it is super cool. And the cook-off has, there's only characters, there are 5 people in it. There are 3 contestants. There's an MC named Kenny Kincaid that's all like smiles, teeth and hair. And we have a food critic judge whose name is Burl Bennett, who is like an HR nightmare. So it's a comedy.
It's a comedy, but I bet it doesn't end well.
It ends well.
Okay.
It ends great. Both end great.
Perfect.
And they're both like G-rated. They're both, they're funny. They're comedies. But it's harder to find an operatic comedy because so many of the stories, kind of head toward darker areas. But both Pinafore and The Cook-Off and Bon Appetit, they're both comedies and for the entire family.
All in.
Thank you, John. It's just really great to get to ask you a couple questions. And again, I just want to compliment the lightheartedness with which you answer the questions and being able to meet the audience where they're at, but also encouraging them to say, hey, this is going to be trying something that you haven't tasted before. So, give it a chance. Maybe the first thing you see isn't going to be your very favorite, but the fact that I just hear the words Bugs Bunny come out of your mouth during this time was not something I expected. To hear about a cooking show that is done live in the audience, I think that really helps expand the bell curve that you do have some stuff that is important and historical and tells those timeless truths, but also you give a nod to an audience that is looking to something different. And I think that's really fantastic how you explained that. So I definitely come away from my dumb questions feeling much more educated. So thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome. But my first exposure to opera before I went to college, and I didn't know what it was, is when I was a small child and I was watching Gilligan's Island. And they had they were doing a play or a musical they had put together on the island, and one character was singing a song, and I found out later he was singing one of the songs from Carmen. Now, I didn't know that until I saw Carmen and said, hey, that's from Gilligan's Island. No, it's the other way around. But that was my first exposure. And we've all heard the melodies. We've all heard the songs. People just don't know what they are, but they've heard them before. So...
Well, maybe take this moment to talk some about the Nashville Friends of the Opera and just what the objective of that is, because I, again, see your heart of an educator and an ambassador for this art form. So maybe talk to me about some of the ways that Nashville Opera is deepening its roots here in Nashville and getting people to try it for the first time.
Well, the Friends of Nashville Opera is a volunteer group with the opera. They've been with it since the start, since I've been here. For a long time, they were known as the Nashville Opera Guild, and they rebranded into the Friends of Nashville Opera a few years ago. And these are terrific volunteers that sometimes work our shows. They have a large fundraiser for the opera that they put together in February called La Bella Notte, and it's been very successful. And I'm sure we'll be doing it again this February. But they do a lot of wonderful things. They're kind of our support system of volunteers here in Nashville.
If someone was wanting to really try to find an experience that they wanted to ask questions to, how could they call up the Nashville Opera and get who answers the phone? Like, how could somebody say, hey, is this an appropriate show? Let's say that they make it to Carmen or they don't make it to Carmen, and they're looking to try to find an appropriate entree into it without kind of looking silly. What's the best way for them to be able to do that research and make sure that it's appropriate for what they're looking to do for the evening?
They can definitely call the office. We put on our website, when we list the shows, we put some disclaimers about what's in the show as far as some content, if there's a content warning. Not often, because they're not that bad. I make them sound like they're horrible. They aren't that bad.
Only a little stabby.
Just a little stabby occasionally. But definitely call the office, talk to somebody there, or ask for me. I'll be glad to talk to anybody just about to try to explain just what it is they will experience and what they're going to see. We're happy and do that.
Well, and I was reading in your bio, too, how much you guys are doing outreach to schools and to children to try to involve families. Do you want to share a little bit about that for our audience?
Well, we have a number of really great outreach engagement activities we do. We have a tour to the schools of Nashville, primarily to elementary schools, and there are a number of operas written geared specifically for children. Okay, and they're usually around 35 minutes long. They're based on a fairy tale. The composer, and there's a good friend of mine that's writing these now, will take music by Mozart that's public domain, and he'll use it and piece it together into a pastiche. He'll put new lyrics with it. And so last year we did an opera and took it into the schools based on The Three Little Pigs. And it's a big hit. It's a big, big hit. But I started that program when I first came to Nashville. So we actually put together a fully staged opera with singers. We audition around the country, bring in 4 top-level singers in costume with sets, with piano, and we take it out to the schools of Middle Tennessee. We do about a 7-week tour. We've done this forever.
Wow.
And we play to around 25,000 children a year.
Okay, so if I'm sitting here thinking my kids have to see this, how do I get our school on your list? How do I get them on the tour?
Well, the school just needs to, we put an alert out, like it'll start in about a month or so, that it's available for any school that wants to call us, and you have to call early because obviously it books up fast. We offer this at no cost to the school.
Wow.
Because so many schools are having their budgets cut and they're having their music program, taken apart. So we bring this into the schools at no cost to the schools. And we also, with the education tour, we often play on weekends. We do free public performances at public libraries or at other facilities. We play to Nashville libraries. We play at the Brentwood Library. We play at the Franklin Library. And the library publicizes those, again, at no cost to them. We just think it's important to bring this out. But we're very proud of this education tour because we play to so many children. The scripts that are written, again, they're very light, they're very funny. I think the end of one of the shows, one of the taglines is Little Red Riding Hood show, which I love. She turns to the audience and says, the huntsman never did chop the big bad wolf into a million pieces because it turned out the big bad wolf is an endangered species. But seriously. So it's that type of light humor, And it goes over so well. And in fact, one school we went to this year, they called us and said the children were so inspired by this, they've created their own version. They've created their own opera of the Three Little Pigs. And so they sent us a video, and it was the most cute, adorable thing ever.
Oh.
So like I said, I'm very proud of that. We also have a very robust engagement activity that we do during the pandemic. When everything kind of stopped, we couldn't perform indoors. And so we started this thing called Opera on Wheels, and in which we would take opera outdoors, and you could play outdoors with social distancing. And so we started this, and we created this rolling stage I think originally it was owned by Jack Daniels as a display stage. But
like all good things in Tennessee, it was originally.
Indeed, originally it was Jack Daniels.
Pretty sure my pen is made from barrels from Jack Daniels.
So it's a trailer, and it has a hydraulic wall, and we pull it up. We have a truck that pulls this giant trailer, and then the hydraulic of the wall comes down and creates a stage, and we have lighting and sound, and then we perform. And we do this at public parks in town. We do it all around. But we started this during the pandemic, and it became so popular. We're doing it now. In fact, we're in the midst of the tour right now, and it's hitting various places around Tennessee for the next 3 weeks. And then we'll do it again in the fall. And we're dependent on weather because it's an outdoor thing. But it's hugely popular, and we play there. We play to around over 25,000 people. With Opera on Wheels. But that allows us to take art and music deep into the community itself. And one thing that we do with this too, with the Opera on Wheels, is we play to a lot of assisted living centers. And we started this during the pandemic, and we'd pull up into the parking lot, here comes the stage, and then everyone would come out, they'd bring chairs out, and we perform. Last week we're at Abe's Garden Community in Green Hills, which is a memory care facility, and we've been there every year, and they always ask us to come back. And once again, at no charge, we do this as a free service. We rely so much on donation from people, and we fundraise a good bit, but there's so much generosity from people, from individual givers, from foundations, from government grants, that we just feel it's important that we offer. For those donations, we want to offer this at no cost. And so we're able to.
I see through a lot of your story this idea of abundance. You know, a lot of people in our day and age, I feel like, are afraid of scarcity, and scarcity drives a lot of our decision making, fear of not having enough. And I see you saying there's an abundance of generosity, there's an abundance of audience, there's an abundance of talent and joy for this medium. And I just want to commend you. I don't see somebody with an abundance mindset that often, and so that's really fun to hear.
Well, thank you. We're very fortunate. We're fortunate to be here in Nashville. We're fortunate to have such a supportive community, and we like what we do.
Yeah.
I think it's important. I really like what we do, and I love the storytelling aspect. And a lot of people, when they look at opera, they don't think about storytelling, but that's really what it is.
One of my favorite questions to ask entrepreneurs in business or any space is if they had a magic wand moment where a big sum of money showed up for them, somebody listening just is unbelievably compelled, or someone like the Indiana story where you've got just New York quality equipment that just gets dropped in the middle of Indiana. If you had a significant sum of money, what are the things that you would deploy that towards as the Nashville Opera sits today? What are some things that are stretch goals for you that if money was no object, you'd get to work on right away?
I would expand our education program, because right now we have a 7-week tour and we have a waiting list because it's so popular. So if we had more money, I would like to expand that to like another month. We could easily do another month and fill it up with schools in Nashville. That's a goal of ours. The same thing with our education program with Opera on Wheels. We would beef up the amount of community concerts we could do. From a main stage level, I would buy an LED video wall in a heartbeat.
Okay.
I would like a giant video wall because I love that technology. And you can do so much in that with the shows, because so many companies are moving away from traditional scenery and hard scenery for a number of reasons. And one is expense. But we as a company have embraced technology as much as we can afford. And so I've done so many shows creatively with video and incorporating video into the show. And some diehard opera people, the same thing with surtitles. There's some pushback, or was, until we showed what it can do.
Sure.
And once you do that, people are going, wow. So I would use it to increase a lot of the things we're already doing. but we could do more of and do it better.
Maybe the last question that I have is, when you think about other art centers throughout Tennessee and you see other theatrical venues and symphony center and all these other ones, there's one vein to look at it as competitors, right? You're competing over people coming to fill seats and to attend fundraisers. And then there's another way of looking at it about, you talked earlier about the importance of people experiencing this art form. So can you contrast those two things for me of just what is the importance for someone to experience the opera, and how do you view other theatrical performance centers throughout Tennessee in relation to your mission?
We are very proud to say that here in Nashville, we have an incredibly collegial relationship with all the other arts groups. That is not often the case in other cities, but we have a terrific working relationship. We support each other. The larger companies that we really work with are the Nashville Ballet, the Nashville Rep, the Nashville Symphony, and we all have a great relationship together, which I say is sometimes unusual, but it's a very supportive relationship. I think that people experiencing opera is important because experiencing any type of the arts, I think, is so important to your personal growth and how you see the world. I really am a strong believer, and this sounds kind of like naive, but I'm really a strong believer that the arts can change things. It can change the world, can change a person's life. One thing we started a few years ago with that in mind is we started a partnership with two universities here in town. And so Nashville Opera has a strong partnership with Tennessee State University and Fisk University. These are Nashville's two HBCUs. That's historic black college universities. And we started this as a chance to give their students a head start and almost a conservatory-type limited training. So we have a cohort of about 8 to 10 students per year. I think it's 10 this year. And we do a series throughout the year that they're involved with. It's almost like a masterclass series where we do singing masterclasses, but we also bring in people outside of performance to talk to people about maybe if you start as a singer but you want to move into administration, how do I do that? And so we've done a lot of Zoom meetings where I brought in major agents from New York to talk about management and being a manager. I brought in some great singers to talk about their career. There's a wonderful baritone named Lester Lynch, and he's done Porgy and Bess all over the world.
That's a great baritone name, by the way.
I know, right?
Lester Lynch.
I know, right. So I brought him in by Zoom to talk to these students, and they would never, ever get a chance to have that type of contact. But we're trying to offer that because the more contact with the arts you have, the better. But I'm proud of what we do here. I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish here. But I'm always looking to involve people, and I'm always looking to expose people to this art form. Can I tell you one last thing? I was doing a talk. I do a lot of talks at Rotary clubs sometimes, used to. And I was at one club, and it was a women's book club, right? And the ages varied from like 40s. There was one little one there who was like a couple in their 70s. And so big variation. So we're talking. None of them knew anything about opera. And so I brought some music to play and just talk through, because I've done a lot of talks like this. And I was saying there's a French piece written around 1900 called Pélias et Mélisande. It was written by Debussy. And it's this lush, impressionistic, beautiful music. The story is a little obscure, but the music is fantastic. But in it, there's a woman named Mélisande who's a young woman, and she's married to an older guy, right? The older guy has a brother whose name is Pélias, and he's visiting. And you see like sparks going ching ching between the girl and the younger guy, and they know it's wrong, but they feel something for each other. So there's a scene when Pélias, the guy, is out in the garden area, and the house is here, and there's a balcony. And so Mélisande comes out on the balcony, and they kind of talk to each other in secret. and they try to touch each other, and they reach, and it's too far to reach. And he says to her, throw your hair down so I can at least touch your hair. Now she needs to have the best wig in the world. She needs like a 10-foot long wig. And so she throws her hair down, and it cascades down and touches the ground. And I was playing this music, and I said, at this point in the music, Pelias walks into her hair and pulls it around himself. So he buries himself in her hair. And I paused, and this one lady who had to be 75 goes, what happens next? And I'm going, that's what you want. And that's what you want. Yeah. You want the what happens next feeling of anybody that comes to anything that we do. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen? And that's not what people expect with an opera, but I feel it's there. I feel that's what we want. It's connecting with an audience through music and storytelling and giving you an experience.
I really resonate with the message that art does have the ability to change things. And I've seen that most personally in comedy, where once something becomes mockable, that you can make fun of it, you can start to laugh about it, that's a really important part of the healing process. Yeah. Is that there are things that it's just too soon. You can't make jokes about it, you can't make fun of it, and you can see where it's at in the healing process. And so I think from an opera standpoint, to be able to see its role as a storyteller and telling stories that are very old but relevant today, and stories that are very new, and doing it in a way that perhaps is a little different, challenging sometimes intentionally, and hopefully in some ways we're trying to remove some of the challenge from it. I just really appreciate the service that you have really spent nearly the entirety of your life to making this art form available to people, that were it not for your personality, your approachability, I think far fewer people would have experienced it. So thank you for giving the message that you have and having the posture that you've brought here today. This has been a really treat for me to get to ask you questions and learn all about what you do.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So fun. Thank you for being here.